The marketing campaign that destroyed a franchise. This Blizzard.
Breaking news, everybody. Guy who's only ever beat Dead Cells at 0 boss cells is making an entire video about Dead Cells. Could possibly be illegal. People will make fun of me. But we're not really here today to talk about the game itself. The game's good. If you haven't played it, go play it. It's been out since
The game's good. Yeah, I agree. I have heard about Dead Cells. People say it's good.
2017. I mean, what am I really going to add to this conversation? What we're here to talk about is some major indie drama. A slightly confusing piece of conflict that's tied to the end of Dead Cells active support that was announced in February of this year. Now, I'll admit, this isn't exactly my forte as a content creator. I mean, up until recently, the only major indie drama that I was even aware of was the 2014 smash hit Whiplash starring J.K. Simmons.
If that's a joke, that's a really bad joke because I have no idea what any of those words mean.
Get it, because it's a major indie drama. But the reason I still wanted to talk about it, even if it is a little bit late, is I think it brings up some broader questions that I find interesting, like who really makes the games we love, how can marketing carefully skew the truth for a more favorable soundbite, and is there such a thing as earned goodwill for companies in an industry with so much turnover? Before we get into all that though, let's
Definitely is. As Blizzard, they have survived off of goodwill for decades now. Sad but true. Same for Destiny to a degree. People love Bungie, even though old Bungie is absolutely dead and forgotten. There's a lot of old companies.
First, talk about the problem at hand. Throughout 2023, in multiple interviews, Evil Empire, the current active developers on Dead Cells, claim to have plans to support the game for years to come, at the very least through 2024, and by many accounts through 2025. What comes next, who knows, but those years at least seem to be covered. As late as October of 2023, as evidenced by an Insider Gaming interview with Evil Empire's COO, there were still plenty of plans to keep updating the game, and it was mentioned that future
Damn, that's a lot of hot for literally nothing of value. Dude, this just proves how much long legs matter, okay? This is just it. Long legs, flappy, whatever that kind of insinuates on something, and I'm sold, baby. I'm sold.
updates would be bigger and more spaced out, but still fairly consistent. People have even claimed that there were some actual roadmaps that alluded to the content coming in 2024 and 2025, but I can't quite track those roadmaps down, so it seems like the claims about the future were less etched in stone and more just really confidently repeated in public forums by the team behind the game. And then all of a sudden, about 4 months after this interview, it was announced that major updates to Dead Cells would stop after the final, now aptly titled End is Near update, an update that was already taking an uncharacteristically long and unorganized path to release, and then outside of some minor patches, support for the game would be over. Now, Dead Cells had an amazing run. Selling over 10 million copies as an indie game is beyond ridiculous.
Oh, wow. They made their money back and then some. In fact, a lot of then some, probably. I mean, an indie game can easily cost less than 2 mil to make. Depends, kind of, obviously, but, you know, an indie game can easily take less than 1 mil to make in some cases. So, what, 10 million copies? It's an indie game, so what, 30? 30 buckaroonies? 30 million minus, what was the Steam's cut? 30, 40% or something like that. So, you know, around 20 mil profit? That's insane.
And it's received an insane number of updates over the course of 7 years, so it's a little weird saying that its lifespan feels like it's been cut short. But considering the abrupt nature of the announcement, the fact that it seems to contradict past statements, the non-miraculousness of the supposed final update, and the subsequent blog post by a former dev accusing the IP owners of pulling something a little hinky here, there's plenty of reason to believe that something spicy might be stewing behind the scenes. But one thing that makes this narrative a little bit tough to follow at times is that Dead Cells has had quite a bit of turnover in personnel over the years, so I think the first central question we should ask is, who made Dead Cells? This is a surprisingly tough question to answer, and it's only going to get tougher as we go along, because usually—
Oh, that's awkward. Usually this is the easy question to answer. the studio and people work there.
You would just say the company name, right? And you would just be like, oh, they made it. And I said the company name earlier, Evil Empire. I mean, it's their COO answering these questions, so I guess they made Dead Cells. But no, in fact, if you followed Dead Cells' earlier days and haven't been keeping up with it recently, you might even be confused hearing the name Evil Empire associated so heavily with it, because Motion Twin were the original creators of the game when it launched in 2017.
Oh my, and the plot suddenly becomes crazy. So you're telling me some kind of random indie studio made Dead Cells, turned it into an IP, and then some other indie studio bought the IP? How does this even work?
That's when it released in early access, after which it hit its 1.0 or full release state in mid-2018, and then in 2019 they handed active development over to the company Evil Empire so that team could keep pushing out updates and growing the game, while Motion Twin began.
Okay, so Motion Twin is responsible for the game. They own the IP, so that answers all the questions. It's the beginner thing.
Began work on a new game we now know as Windblown. One thing that gets mixed up in all of this is that people believe Evil Empire is a subsidiary of Motion Twin, just like an offshoot team whose.
Why would it be? If you're an indie studio, there's no point in making a subsidiary of anything. You just expand your own team. The reason why people make subsidiaries of something is because they have subsidiaries of other things that can funnel their money into your own property, so you technically you have an infinity large money churn. Literally what keeps our world from collapsing currently, by the way.
Whole job was to continue Dead Cells while the main team worked on something new, but that's not exactly the case. Evil Empire was established in 2019, its first project was Dead Cells, and it was founded by former members of the Dead Cells marketing team at Motion Twin, but it operates as an independent company and was simply handed the rights to work on the Dead Cells IP because of the close relationship they had with its creators. That means that Motion Twin hasn't been involved in active development of the game for the last 5 years, a time period that seems to supersede Motion Twin's own development time on the base game, and a time period in which Dead Cells sold 9 million of its 10 million total sales. With all that said though, even though it's clear that Evil Empire.
That's pretty insane. But again, that just means that whatever Motion Twins or whatever name is still own the IP.
Had a substantial impact on Dead Cells' life. If you ask somebody based off this information the question, who made Dead Cells, I feel like most people would probably respond, Motion Twin. I mean, props to Evil Empire for what they did, but Motion Twin made Dead Cells. So when their trailer for Windblown, revealed in December of 2023, came with a tagline, by the creators of Dead Cells, I don't think a lot of people batted an eye. Yeah, Motion Twin made Dead Cells, so Windblown, a game by Motion Twin, is by the creators of Dead Cells. Seems pretty straightforward. But let's talk a little bit more about Motion Twin as a company.
Okay, currently I am extremely confused about what I should be confused. None of these questions are currently sparking any, how does this make sense situation, okay? I'm also the title of the video also is questionable. How what marketing are we talking about here currently?
Motion Twin operates as a cooperative company. That means there's no CEOs, no bosses, no hierarchy. Everyone is on the same playing field.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad. That's like Ludwig's shitty company that is already going bankrupt because everyone is equal and everyone's smart and shit. Shut the fuck up. Oh my god. Yeah, this is stupid. If you want to fail something, this is the way to go, boys. Communism.
And the profit is shared equally. In order to maintain.
Bro, is this video going to be actually called How Communism Killed This Game?
The balance there, they've internally capped their team to never hit more than 10 members, and currently Motion Twin has 9 employees. These employees have shifted around quite a bit in the 20 plus years Motion Twin's been making games. If you're wondering if that means that the entire team from Dead Cells has been completely overhauled though, don't worry. According to a recent Q&A, all but one of Dead Cells' original team members have had a part to play in Windblown, which is true. Technically. A good handful of those devs, particularly those who occupied design and programming roles on the team, left the project early, some as early as 2020 when Windblown was still likely in pre-production. On top of that, a very key member of Motion Twin, Sebastian Bernard, has had very little, if anything, to do with Windblown. Sebastian had been a member of Motion Twin since 2001 and played a part in basically every major aspect of Dead Cells, including development, gameplay, controls, and
Well, that's pretty fucked up. You allow the French guy to do things.
Engine. So okay, a lot of the team did contribute at least a little to Windblown, but some of them left pretty early. Still, a few people from the core Dead Cells team are currently working on the new game. According to Motion Twin, half of their current team has carried over from Dead Cells, which I guess means 4.5 people. Not quite sure how that's possible, but maybe one guy's dad worked on Dead Cells and his mom was Hispanic or something? I don't know. Going based off of their employee list, there are in fact 4 people that worked on Dead Cells currently working on Windblown. I guess they did like a 23andMe on that one guy. So this statement, that Windblown is by the creators of Dead Cells, is a little flimsier than it might have first seemed, but I still think it holds some weight. But we're not quite done. Of
Hey, how many times have I said I don't care about what you have previously made, okay? A studio's name saying, "Oh, we're the creators of X good game," it means nothing. Chances are the people have moved away, and this is just one of those classic situations. It's like currently CD Project Red going around saying, "Oh, don't worry, the people who made The Witcher and Cyberpunk and all of the good games, they are working at Witcher 4 also." No, they're not. No, they're not. The CEO lies when he says this, and we have the proof. We literally have the people in charge of what lists, and we can compare them, and most of them are fucking gonzo. So, this is a common lie. This is why I don't care about any studio and being a fan of any studio at this point. If you're a fan of particular studio, I mean, you're probably a COD player or some shit like that, to be honest. Or you're an idiot, because there's no point in being a fan of a studio. Lightning in a bottle is the most common thing that happens in gaming now, and most studios are not repeating that.
those 4 employees, one of them joined late 2016, right before the game launched in its early access state, and another joined late 2018, under a year before development duties were passed on to Evil Empire. Now, I don't say any of this to undermine the work these people did at the company, far from it. I'm not trying to say that
I do. They're frauds, they're cheats, they're scam artists. This is a lie. This is a bolden lie.
these people didn't have contributions to the game, that would be stupid. But if they're considered as core members of the Dead Cells team, as declared by Motion Twin themselves, especially since they're some of the only ones holding this precariously dangling statement up, what's stopping Evil Empire from also being considered core members of Dead Cells? Not that Motion Twin has ever outwardly claimed that they aren't, but to touch back on our big question of who made Dead Cells, I mean, if some of the only remaining contributing members of Dead Cells still on Windblown joined later in development, but are still accepted by the general public as the creators of Dead Cells because they're tied to the Motion Twin name, what about the members of the Evil Empire team who joined not long after at all and worked on the project for 5 years? It's 5 most successful years at that. None of this undercuts what any individual or group has done for the game, but it does kind of show how that big question that we talked about earlier goes from a black and white answer to something a little bit more complicated. Who created Dead Cells? Well, it's Motion Twin, but it's not quite the current Motion Twin, but still some of them. It's also Evil Empire, not just for their work, but also the fact that a founding member of that company is listed as a core member of the original Dead Cells team. And it's also Sebastian Bernard and all these other creative forces from a small team that have gone to do other things. And this all goes well past Dead Cells also. Whenever a major contributor to a project leaves for a different company, there's a chance that the new game they're involved in is also dubbed as from the creators of, or from the minds behind something you love. But realistically, you don't know how big of a part of that project they were, and obviously the full dynamics of the team are important to the final product as well, which means that this statement becomes more of a fluff piece to instill confidence rather than any real information. This is far from the only situation we've seen some
I mean, yeah. We know how this ends, right? We have seen this 100 times over. Remember Fallout New Vegas? Of course you do. Great game. Best game, in fact. And then you have the Outer Worlds, which was by the literal same people, by the way. Literally the same people. There were so many of them in key positions, talent, people behind the vision and whatnot. And the Outer Worlds was a sham. It sucked. It was nowhere near to the quality what people dreamt, wished, and sought after.
something like this, so I'm not accusing Motion Twin of shady marketing tactics, for this statement at least. But I do think it's an interesting look at the level of turnover that can take place on a team in just a few years, and how marketing can always skew that into a positive light
Damn!
regardless. Using phrasing like, all but one member of that game you love also contributed to this game, and half of our current staff worked on that game you like, is good marketing, but it never really means exactly what you think it means. It really all comes down to the Theseus paradox. If every element of an object is replaced over time, even in an identical fashion, can it still be considered the same object? And if the Motion Twin that initially created Dead Cells has been almost
It's called the Ship of Theseus, not the Theseus. This is the first time I actually hear anyone say the Theseus paradox. I guess it makes sense, and probably someone says it like that, but nah, fam, it's probably just the Ship of Theseus. But yeah, the way that he described it is accurate to the paradox, kinda.
entirely overhauled, is Windblown really by the creators of Dead Cells? But if the question of who made this game was the only confusing
Okay, I'm still confused how the marketing is killing it.
part of this whole process, I probably wouldn't have made it a whole video, to be honest. I mean, sure, it's a nice little window
I mean, from everything that we have seen from the new-looking game, I mean, it doesn't even look remotely close to Dead Cells. It looks like a completely different game. It looks completely different in any way. So, why the hell would I buy the new game if I'm interested in Dead Cells, considering how different they look?
into the ever-changing nature of these development teams, but it also feels a little bit rude to look at an indie studio especially and say, you're not who you really say you are, because that feels kind of, I don't know, unfair. The game's the game, that's just how it is. But that is not the only issue at hand. Remember when I said that Dead Cells development felt like it was cut short? The whole thing seemed kind of rushed and sudden? Well, the prevailing theory is that Dead Cells updates were canned to make way for Windblown's marketing. Windblown and Dead Cells don't completely overlap as games, but they do occupy the same roguelite space, and it may be harder to convince people that the Dead Cells team is making Windblown when Dead Cells is continuing development at the same time. After all, most people don't really follow the ins and outs of which company's making what, and may not really realize how the team's been split or members are being carried over. That is a bit of a harsh accusation to throw around though. I mean, not only does it imply that a dedicated fanbase was left out to dry, even though it was promised more content just because of a marketing opportunity.
Also, but damn, this is some 5-tier fucking editing right there, boys.
But it also suggests that Evil Empire, who clearly had more ideas to add to the game, was kicked off the project unceremoniously to make room for a different company's game to maybe sell better. But there are a lot of reasons to believe this might be the case. For starters, the announcement of the end of active Dead Cell support came just 2 months after Windblown was revealed and interest in the project could be gauged. The game had been in development since 2019, so for the end of Dead Cells to feel so unplanned when
Also, the name Windblown, is anyone excited by that? Is anyone really excited about it in the slightest? A Windblown? Windblown? Is it out already, by the way? Let's check. Let's check. Wind blown by Dead Cells release date. See if we find something. Wind blown October 24, 2024. Ooh. Okay. In that case, we can look at the Steam DB. Wind blown price history Steam DB. A whopping. This does not look that good. This definitely does not look big good, okay? Let me also find Steam DB Dead Cell. Jesus, there's... Oh, wow, what the fuck? Was it not released on Steam? Hey, that's wild. Anyway, let me share the screen with you a little bit. We're gonna start with Windblown, right? Because this actually surprised me when I just saw it, so it's gonna be interesting. This one... yes. This is the right. Okay, so this is Windblown. It released to 10k peak players, which is better than most AAA studios nowadays. And now it is hovering around with, you know, like 800-ish, 700-ish people. Let's extend this to see a little bit more. And, you know, in effectively like 1 month they dropped to an absolute irrelevant, which doesn't seem good for a game that sold 10 million copies, which is wild. But then you look at Dead Cells Steam and it was 14k at the top, and it seems like their debut was on Steam, which is kind of wild to imagine that they sold that many copies. 10 million copies? Was there some kind of deal with, I don't know, like Xbox or PlayStation or something like that? Because this seems wild, you know? You're gonna tell me this game sold 10 million copies. Then this must be a success, right? But it's not. It seems kind of wild, doesn't it? This does not track with me at all. But the fact about Dead Cells is that it looks amazing. Is the fact that 15K peak, which happened here-ish, right? Released to a whopping 10K people, and this sold 10 million, and it's still it has a 50% player that from 10K, it's still averaging every day 5K players. This is wild. This doesn't do that. This is insane. These are some insane statistics. I have never seen anything like this on Steam before. This is completely kind of, you know, out of the box, I should say.
Internally, they knew when their next game would release does feel reactionary to a degree. The relationship between Motion Twin and Evil Empire reaching an abrupt and potentially unpleasant end is also indicated by the fact that Evil Empire has completely stopped work on Dead Cells Cold Turkey, and Motion Twin has apparently picked up the remaining development for the final update. Evil Empire was in the middle of beta testing this update right before the news broke out, and now suddenly, after 5 years of a hands-off approach, Motion Twin is now picking up the last update midway through. That seems like a bad breakup. But most tellingly, Sebastian Bernard, the former key member of Motion Twin I mentioned earlier, made a few claims off the heels of the end of update announcement, saying that based off what he knew internally, this whole thing was an asshole move from what he dubbed as a greedy company. He says that the Windblown team is almost entirely separate from the Dead Cells one, and even further downplays some of the connections that they do have. He also suggests that maybe they grew resentful of Evil Empire's ever-increasing ties to Dead Cells' name, which is another claims that fans seem to echo.
Bro, this is not okay. Listen. You don't want to be that you don't want to be. This is effectively the Bethesda situation, right? You don't want to be in a Bethesda situation where the best Fallout game is Fallout New Vegas and you didn't even make that. Okay, you don't want to be in that situation. Ask Todd Howard. He literally gets shorted by a centimeter every single year because of that.
I guess it's not hard to imagine a level of inadequacy or insecurity or just fear of losing brand recognition that could stem from a different studio gaining more and more credit for something you started, especially since you went through enough changes over the last few years to leave you with arguably less of the game's DNA in your team than they have in theirs. Sebastian even says himself that Evil Empire is the only true Dead Cells studio at this point, and Motion Twin losing that reputation is bad for business. So these are obviously all very scathing claims, and my title is kind of scathing also, but one thing I do want to clarify is that none of this is definitive, and my title especially is, it's like a spicy piece of clickbait pie, okay? I don't think you need to boycott Windblown. I think we should be conscious of the fact that we don't really know what's going on and what's happening internally. Obviously, you can come to whatever conclusion you want, but I say it's always good to take these things with a grain of salt. Way too many vague situations like this get flipped on their head after new information is revealed, so don't take any conclusions here as pure fact. On that note, actually, I should probably talk about some of the response from Motion Twin to this backlash. They did put out a huge FAQ a little while after these claims from fans and Sebastian, and it felt like a way to address the situation without alerting more people to the fact that there was a situation worth addressing. They sort of hide their responses inside a series of vague hype statements about Windblown and constant mentions of how it's connected to the Dead Cells team. It is worded a little bit strangely, but they also address some things head on. On the claim that they had plans for Dead Cells all the way till 2025, they basically say, we jumped the gun a little bit with talking about that. These were always discussions we were having, but they weren't concrete plans. There was no roadmap saying 2025. Calm down, everybody. There's no conspiracy. We just changed directions with the game. They also mentioned that development could have continued in tandem with Windblown development since well, they are different companies working on it, but they just felt that Dead Cells was complete and didn't need to overstay its welcome. By all accounts, Evil Empire still had ideas they were hoping to implement, Motion Twin didn't have to spend any development costs on the game, and they were making money off the IPs, so I'm not sure if that "it felt complete" response holds a ton of weight, but it is their official stance. They also directly addressed the question of whether Dead Cells was shut down to prop up Windblown, and they mentioned that the question hurts because why would they ever do such a thing? They love Dead Cells. But then they do just kind of double down on the whole "it felt finished"
This sounds like a bunch of gunk and nothing. Yeah, that's true. Anyway, that was Assad on you 10 out of 10. Bye!